Oh, here comes the rain, right in time.
Yeah, hello, and welcome to the Christopher and Dana Reeve of Paralysis Foundation. I'm Nurse Linda. I'm happy to see you here today. I'm a lightly pigmented middle-aged woman with brown hair with silver streaks, and today I have on a peach figured shirt and a peach sweater over it. I just think peach sounds better than orange, so I'm going to call it peach. I have glasses on and I have the reef background behind me. And today I'm so happy. I hope many of you probably already know our guest today, one of our all-time favorites at the Reeve Foundation and fellow comrade, my fellow coworker, Dr. John Chang, who is a distinguished professor of psychology. And I love to say it because it's well earned. So, welcome, Dr. John. And would you like to maybe introduce yourself a bit more and describe yourself?
Thank you, Linda, for inviting me again, and as well as the foundation. I am John Chang. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a professor at East Stroudsburg University. I am wearing army fatigue type green color with a baseball hat. Um, I am an Asian male individual. I'm sitting in my office with two chairs in the back of me and my bookshelf full of random things. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to our discussion today.
Good, because I think that a lot of people are interested in relationships. And I just want to put a disclaimer out there. We're going to talk about relationships today with different people and how to start a relationship, how to maintain a relationship, what to do in a relationship, or suggestions. We can't tell you what to do, but I just want everybody to know when we're talking about relationships, it's interactions between people, and it's not necessarily a sexual relationship. But sometimes a lot of people want to divert to that particular band of things. But we're not going there today unless somebody has a particular question, and then I guess we'll address it at that time. But today we're just going to start and talk about different types of relationships because there's all different kinds. And so, would you like to open with different kinds of relationships, John?
Well, I mean, I think there are the ones who are, I always call it your inner circle, which are probably the most critical for people like us with disabilities, which would be your family and uh, and your caregiver. I think those two categories are probably the most critical ones that I notice are the ones that impact our lives, our quality of life most. Um, I think then you move out a little bit and you got your good friends, your great friends, your colleagues, and it starts to go out a little bit that way. You know, the outside world and the community, it's probably the farther out, doesn't impact you as much every day. But I think the relationships that you see every day that probably are the ones that are more impactful and how well we live and the quality of life I have when it comes to relationships.
That's interesting because you described the inner circle. And as you said that, I thought, well, gee, what's my inner circle? Because I do have family, but they live far away. So I don't impact with them every day. Now they impact my life, certainly, because we're family and we are close, but I don't see them very
Mhm.
often because they all live in in the different parts of the country. And so I'm kind of all by myself. So my inner circle is a little bit different because it, my closest people, the people that are closest to me, would be some very close friends. I have
Mhm.
friends who are close and friends who are not so close. So it can be different for everybody, which
It it
what
can
you've
be, and
described is
that's why I put the caveat on that. Those you tend to see every day. So
yes,
so
yes.
it not only is there a biological relationship at times if it's your immediate family, but then there is also the time spent. Those you have to see every day becomes more critical in how you view the life. And even your colleagues, if you see the same colleagues every day, then it becomes a big impact for who you are as well over time. Now, your colleagues may not be part of your caregiving process, but that's why caregivers are really important as well, because they tend to see you every day, depending on the level of injury, of course, um, but that plays a big factor as well.
Well, so when we talk about relationships that, we have your inner circle, and what kinds of things might you share with them versus your circles as you get further out? What would be the differences in communicating with them and how you would, how you deal with them, or just in general life, what kinds of things you might share with them and what kinds of things you might not share with them, or what would be the differences in, I mean, we don't all have to share our minute details of every step of our life with every single person we come across.
And that's a great question because what I found out in the years I've been disabled and all the years that I've had, being a professor, thousands of relationships with different students and different colleagues, is that you tend to pick and choose, obviously, the ones you think is allowed into your personal life. Um, and I think that the ones who become part of your personal life beyond the expectation of the caregiver or the colleague, you tend to have a better relationship because you're connected beyond just the work. So, so I had a colleague who invited me over for just to see her house, and you know, it was great just to be able to go out of work and just be able to stop by at her house to enjoy her house. So anytime you feel comfortable and feel like that is an option for you, it's nice. It becomes more special when someone becomes be aware of your personal life. And now that comes with problems as well because now they're part of your personal psyche. And if they come and leave in your life, that's hard, especially with caregivers. If your caregivers come in, they become part of your life. Become your friend. Sometimes they become your social activity, your confidant, and not only your caregiver, but then um, sometimes they leave, and it's devastating. So, um, but yeah, there's no set rule, I believe, because it's impossible to see someone so often and not feel like you should share their life with them somewhere.
So, are there any boundaries that you might suggest with the caregiver role?
Well, again, it depends on the caregiver. I think some caregivers are, um, or even some family members are not interested in your quality of life, even though they're biologically your family. Even though they may not, even though they are part of your life biologically, legally, but they're not interested in how you adapted to your disability. So it's always very specific to the individual that you're around and the people that you tend to want to open up. But again, the caveat to that is whenever you open up to anybody, you have the pluses of the bonus of a great relationship, and then you also have the minuses that you can get hurt.
That's in all relationships, is it not?
As you
These
and I
these
talked
things
about before,
happen.
there's being disabled or being having a different physical existence does not change the common theme of humanity, which is communication and and communication and value driven expectations. That's when conflicts occur, is when and expectations are different.
Right, right. Or surprises come along the way. So I am thinking of an incident, and there are many, but this one incident always comes to mind, and it happened years and years and years ago in my life. But there was a younger woman who was in the hospital, and she hired a younger woman because they were about the same age. They enjoyed the same music, they had the same interests, you know. So she hired a woman to be her caregiver. And it just seemed like it was just because, you know, they were like right on the same wavelength. Everything was really great. Well, of course, this was a younger woman who was injured, and you know, she liked to enjoy life, and she would go out and she would have dates and she would have friends and all these kinds of things. And this other, the caregiver would come with her, and it was working out pretty well. Well, sometimes she wanted maybe some alone time with her friends or with her date or something, or, you know, there were some times when she wanted the caregiver to step back a bit, but the caregiver saw this as this big friendship that she was, you know, she was being paid as a caregiver, but she was a younger woman, so, you know, she didn't maybe have a lot of the emotional maturity that maybe was needed as a caregiver. And so anyway, it was good until it wasn't. And I think that a lot of people have that kind of experience. How do you deal with somebody, be it family member, be it a caregiver, somebody who kind of butts into your life a little bit too much? Or, you know, you're very friendly, maybe you've confided in them when the two of you are together, or, you know, having personal time together or something, or maybe you want to, you know, gossip a little bit. I Gossip probably isn't the right word, but sometimes we like to gossip a little bit, you know. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute. I need you to step back. How do you politely, you know, because they had set up their rules of how they were going to manage things, but, you know, you can't stumble across every single problem.
No.
So
No.
how do you do you somebody's kind of encroaching on your life?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and that's a tough question because it is not that things don't happen and you have to. The common theme is that you have the ability to when they're not together with the other gentleman or whatever, to say, look, I like this gentleman, I like to have an opportunity to spend some quality time with him one on one. So is it okay, if when we're out that I, ask you to step aside a little bit, uh, for a little bit if I'm not needing your assistance to so I can communicate with the partner or the friend. And that's just a matter of communicating. It is hard, though. I have to admit, it is hard that if you had pre-established expectations already in the past, and that she was always there and she was always next to you during dates and stuff, and all of a sudden you're changing the rules. So, so both individuals going to feel awkward in a discussion, um, but they have to have some trust and that their intent is a good one. And that's based on a relationship. So, so yeah, the person could have had a heart to heart, not heart to heart. I mean, when I say heart to heart, it sounds like it's so difficult. It's more just an open communication. Say, look, I think I'm going to go out with Jack again next time, maybe, and I know you have to come along because of my needs, but um, there may be an opportunity where I get to talk to him one on one, and would that be okay if I let you step aside? And I'm going to guess that person's probably going to say, yeah, no problem with that. If she truly wants the best life for her friend.
Well, you know, and you, being a psychologist, you have the words, and you are so polite about it. And you have a way of saying things that wouldn't offend anybody. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, I see completely what you're talking about." Not everybody has that kind of thing. Sometimes we get all kind of revved up, you know, and you just want to say, "Could you just get out of the way, please?" You know, or something. But I think that, you know, if you how do you gain that ability that you have developed, I'm sure, over years of speaking to people that it's not offensive, that it's not abrasive?
Well, as a psychologist, obviously that's your skill set that you have to learn because there's tons of things you have to tell your client they don't do well without saying that they don't do it well. And it has to be subtle. It has to be in a way that you hope that because once that person gets defensive, the conversation's gone. So,
Yes.
and that's hard. It's hard because emotionally you're connected to the person, and so you try to avoid that. The best time to do it is when you are thinking of it way before it happens, when it actually happens. Um, it is hard at times to plan for everything, but I'll give a perfect example. And I had my assistant Jackie here next to me helping me with my computer today. I was going to my 25-year reunion. I haven't seen these classmates since 25 years, and um, I some of them haven't even never even seen me in a wheelchair because I got hurt after high school. So I was very self-conscious. You would think at this point in my life I wouldn't be. I know Jackie was going to come along, but I said, you know, Jackie's usually pretty good sticking around me because if I need something, but I think we had a conversation. I said, okay, I'm going to go there. I'm going to try to converse with them. You know, if it's okay if you hang out at the table. And so if I need to eat or if I need something, I'll come over and to you. And so she right, Jack? She kept herself occupied. She really didn't flow into the ebb and flow of my conversations with my classmates. Not that she wanted to do that, but she knew that she didn't have to be near me to make sure I was okay, that I would come to her. Um, you know, she probably kept an eye on me periodically, but so it was a conversation because traditionally my caregivers or her would be around me enough to be close proximity. But this time, you know, she was 40, 50 feet away. And so that conversation had to happen. And it was at that time it was an easy conversation because it wasn't built on emotion. It was just built on logic. So communication is always key.
Well, and sometimes I think not all, certainly not all caregivers, but sometimes I think some people confuse the physical help that's needed versus I don't need you to help me with my conversation. I know what I want to say. I know the questions I want to ask. I don't need you to butt into my conversation that I have going on. It's kind of one, oh, I want to help you so much. I'm going to help you do everything. You know, it's just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
different.
absolutely.
There is somebody who wrote in a question about this topic. First of all, she said, this is such a good question. So thank you for that. How do you do this when you really want friendship and companionship, but on your terms? It's hard to find friends and even harder to feel like you're being too pushy with your needs and boundaries. I don't want to be selfish and lose the few people I have. So friendship, caregiving is one thing because that person is there to help you do things, but friends are different. Now, your caregiver can be your friend, but not always does that happen in that way. But what about friends who really don't know that much about your health care and they just want to really help you? And, like maybe they want to push your chair when you're capable of pushing your own chair, or they just want to help you because a lot of times people just want to help. So, what do you do about friends who you haven't set up that kind of contract in the beginning, which you need to do with a caregiver? This is the way I like to handle things. These are the things that I need, and we'll continue to work on these things as my needs evolve and change or whatever. But you don't have that with a friend. So what about friends that are just like, "Oh, let me ask you this. Let me help you with that." How do you get them to help when needed but back off sometimes?
That's a great question. I, in my personal opinion, I think most people who have a physical limitation, when you have a new friend or a friend that's invested in your life, they want to know, they would like to know what makes your life who you are. And that's with anything, and not a person without a disability. If I want to get to know someone, I have to ask about their life. And so, and when they do that, and when they want to help, all you have to do in my opinion, is to say thanks first before you say, here's what I need from you. So instead of saying, oh, I don't need my chair to be pushed, I can walk on my own, say, oh, thank you for being so thoughtful. But I can push my own manual chair at times, or whenever someone helps me with getting a door uh, out in public, I always say, oh, I appreciate you being aware of my needs. Thank you very much. But I think I'm okay with the electric doors. So it's a nicer, softer way to set the boundaries there. So, but I like when people want to know about my life, and when they initiate the conversation about specifically something I am, or for me, it brings ease and comfort. And so, but you can say to them, thank you, but no, I don't need that. Instead of just saying, no, I don't need that. That puts people at more of a defense. That's my recommendation.
And
So
that's
so
a
you have,
solid recommendation.
uh,
Yeah.
I hope that helped with the
And
questions.
oh yeah, and I even appreciate even the way you said it on this webinar just a minute ago, the way your tone is. You don't get flustered, you don't get angry, you don't get, oh, just leave me alone. It's like, would you just stop? You don't do any of that. It's just like, okay, that it's
Yeah,
that even tone helps.
you cannot do that with new friends. You can't do that with most friends, because your friends aren't punching bags. So there's this automatic thing you have to give them, which if you do that, you're more likely to keep them as friends. The hard part for people with the disabilities, that sometimes they mix our emotional instability with our disability. And so you have to be cool and calm, because they need to separate your emotional aspect versus your disability aspect. And so it's a good example is, I remember one time a person was blocking the curb cut, and I went up to the window, I knocked on the window, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind moving over? You're blocking the curb cut." And the gentleman was like, "Oh, sure, sure." They moved, and my wife at the time would have said to me, "How could you just go up to them so nicely and ask them?" I would have told them to move up, and gave them a couple curse words, and I said, it's really important for us to set examples of how to approach people, because they're going to mix both of them. He's angry because he's in a wheelchair. It's like, so I try to model that all the time.
Yeah, that is keenly important. And we have another attendee who wrote in and said they always let people help them. And after they're finished holding the automatic door, I calmly thank them, and sometimes I explain my condition. So that's an
I,
interesting approach because not only do you can accept help even if you don't need it. Anybody can accept help even when it's not needed. If it's offered, it's kind of like, well, okay, that's pretty nice. I know if I have a bag of stuff, I'm going in and out of a door and somebody offers to help with the door. Oh, thanks. That's really helpful.
and
But anyway, they
I like
and
the
then
fact
they
that they
explain
also,
what
yeah, they educate them. They had an
yeah.
opportunity to educate them, which is even be more,
That
fantastic,
is,
because
yeah, I really like that. If you feel like you want to, you don't have to. Some people don't want to explain all the time what's going on with them, or they want to keep that personal, and that's fine too. But then this person said they sometimes explain their condition, which is really kind of nice because that helps. It makes me think of sometimes when little kids come up to people, why are you in that wheelchair? What's going on? And, sometimes people get very affronted by that. And it's like,
yeah,
no,
that's
you can,
I would. Yeah, I wish adults were like that. They say stay so, um, you know, pure about the questions,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it is usually it's the adults are rushing the kids away and say, don't ask those
yeah,
questions.
don't
Don't
ask.
ask. Don't
Yeah,
stare.
yeah,
I love when kids stare because they're learning. That's the
yes,
stuff that.
yes, yes. And sometimes kids will ask the most unusual questions, like, "How do you go to the bathroom?" My grandkids, when they became aware of that sometimes people use wheelchairs. They were very, very little. And their parents, who's my daughter and son-in-law, said, "Well, you can call grandma and you can talk to her about that tonight." Because now they weren't putting them off, but they're like, "This would be the best person for you to talk with." But funny story, kind of unrelated to our conversation, but still related. So I was in this very busy elevator, and these little kids came in. They must have been about 4 years old, and they were with their preschool teacher. They were going on a little trip, and we were all on the elevator together. And so this one little kid looks up at me and says, "Well, why are you here?" And it was just kind of, little kids will say whatever they're going to say whenever they're going to say it. It doesn't matter if you're disabled or if you're, just standing there holding stuff. So I thought, gosh, what am I going to say to this little kid? So I said, "Well, I'm going to this meeting of grandmas today because it was a bunch of older, it was my widow women warriors, and I'm going to this meeting of grandmas have a meeting." I'm like, "They sure do." So anyway, it turned out to be really funny. Here's another question. Hi, I'm 2 years plus injured. I find that close family members often express missing me or wanting to spend time with me, but don't know how to initiate or make plans. It feels a bit unfair for that labor to be put on me with all that I have to deal with already. I feel disconnected, even though I'm sure they mean well. And so, what about when, people call up, "Let's get together." Okay, well, you pick out a place where it's accessible for you. So you're the one who's left holding the bag all the time. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And
Yes, it is.
I like the control of picking the event only because if you put it back on the other person, they could pick something crazy that you can't do and you can't enjoy and you can't get in. So I've learned from the past that if I had got the opportunity to control that and make that decision, I'm going to do it because then I know what I can get to and if I'm going to enjoy it. So that's one. Yes, in the ownership, a lot of times you have to initiate the activity because they do not know what is the best thing to do, and they don't want to mess that up. So I would see it as an opportunity to do something with somebody instead of saying, "Oh, I have more work to do." You're right. It does take more work. You're getting put stuff on your plate just to socialize, but you can do it together. Hey, let's have a Zoom meeting. Let's pick some stuff, what makes sense, and make it some of that decision together. But you're right. The ownership tends to be on the person with the disability. I think, teaching them why you pick these events slowly, like as you go to these different events. Hey, I'm at a baseball game. I love baseball. You see the accessible seatings, all that stuff. This is why I like coming to this venue. They'll take notice of these little things. So but over time, it's going to educate them on what to pick and how to pick it. I have my go-to things every year that I go to because I know those things I've done in the past, certain festivals, certain places. So I do them every year because I know it happens. But trust me, it's better to have the opportunity to socialize than to be isolated and alone and they give up on wanting to do things with you. That's even worse.
Right. And sometimes people invite you to their house, and how do you get in? And that can turn out, but if you find a place that accommodates you, and it's not like you have to, like, go out to a fancy restaurant, and things get expensive or whatever. But if you find a a meeting place where you can go, that can be your place where you go and say, "Oh yeah, let's get together. Let's go to our place." And meet, because there's a lot of public places that can accommodate you without having to buy something.
Yeah, all the years I've been disabled, I think I've only been in 4 to 5 homes that are not mine, and they come with a lot of different issues because some homes are great and they can get you can get around. Some homes you get in and you're stuck in one spot. Um,
Yes.
and the I've noticed that the people who are truly invested in wanting to share their home with you are usually really good people because they're willing to go out of their way to put a ramp up and find ways to get you in the house and you know yeah, so in my personal experience, the ones who really want to be part of your life, they extend that welcome, and which is nice, I think. um
It is very nice if if they can go to that much detail. But there's also other things. So you could get in somebody's house and they have a really nice plush carpet, and there you are. You're stuck in
yeah,
the mud. So,
yeah.
there's just all kinds of things. But if you're open and upfront and, well, it was nice coming to your house last time, but quite frankly, your carpet is so lovely, but I can't push on it, so there's just all kinds of things. Um,
Or you can say, I apologize for draining my leg bag on your carpet accidentally, and you know, because things like that will happen. So,
Things
um,
happen. Well, you know what? Sometimes I go and I spill my drink on somebody's carpet. It's just the way it
yep.
is. It happens. Should you tell a friend who, while thankful that his disability is recognized, is not sensitive to the needs of others who might not be disabled? How do I get that equilibrium? So
Uh,
the friend has a disability which is recognized, but they're not being sensitive to the person without disability. So I guess they're talking about themselves too much, or I don't know, it's hard work to maintain friends.
yeah, friendship has to be for friendship to work in my professional personal opinion is that it has to be two people giving each other what they need. It has to be reciprocal. It has to be um, because if it's one-sided, that friendship will not last. So the person who's not disabled, who's loving with the person with the disability, they need to get something out of this relationship other than the fact that they recognize the person's disability. Yeah, over time, that's just going to wear on the able-bodied person without the disability. So, yeah, it sounds like it's one-sided.
Yeah, and you know what? That might not be. That's not um, an issue that is with the individual who has a disability. That can be anybody. We all end up with some friends that are people that we know, and it's all about them and what's going on with them, and they never ask about you, or they never talk about what's going on with you. And what happens is you usually kind of move on to another person, I think.
Mhm, mhm.
Mm.
I think what we're talking about today is really a common theme for all people who relate to other individuals. We all come with different disabilities. Some of us are physical, others are financial, some of our personality. And the question is, what do you do with that? In positive psychology, we try to say, uh, play to your strength instead of
Right.
compensating your weakness.
That's That's really good information. Play to your strengths. So if you know about something, bring up a topic
Right.
and see how that flies. Now, maybe for that person, maybe it won't fly, but if you keep bringing up different topics, maybe they become interested in something that you have. You might help them in that way, kind of thing. Um, Now, I had a person who wrote in, and this was such a brilliant question. We talked about it on the Nurse Linda webinar last month, but it was such a brilliant question because this person had been thinking outside the box. and there was that unfortunate kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, and the person was listening to it, and it's such a sad situation. And the person was listening to it, and they picked up on the part about she didn't have her medicine. And what would you do if and she got to thinking, she's like, I don't tell everybody what medicines I'm on, and I don't tell everybody that I have to take this pill at a certain time because if I don't, then I'll have some side effects, and I'll get all cramped up or whatever. And so she says, I don't give that information to everybody. So, and I think you don't have to give all your information to everybody. You might want to talk if somebody has a question or whatever, but setting up those relationships, you want to be able to count on your family and friends and your caregiver if you need help. You really want to count on them for their help. And so, is there any thoughts about how you can communicate your needs? You kind of already talked about that a little bit with when to help and when not to talk. But how can if you're out with somebody and like okay, your catheter's leaking, I need some help in the bathroom, or I need some help with it. Could you fasten this a little tighter or something so it won't be leaking? How do you bring up those kind of things? What's the best? This is such a loaded question, John. Good luck.
Yeah, and,
Answer that
and
question, John.
answer that question with a simple answer that everyone could use, and we all can live happy ever after. And I'd be the biggest bullshitter in the world. Uh, I've been in so many situations when I did not want to share something I need at that moment, even though if it was medical or if it was something, and because I was too embarrassed. And even at this point in my life, I still too embarrassed to ask for something. If it's a certain person that I've been around enough that they are comfortable with that, I have no problem. But when I'm in the open public and sometimes I'm at a group and like I want to, like for example, if I want to get out of a meeting and the door's closed and the meeting's going on, that means I would have to interrupt the meeting, ask someone to open the door, and get out. So then, instead, I just sit there and suffer through this boring meeting. I don't have a great answer to that other than there are things in life that you're going to have to suffer with because of your lack of ability to do things. Mo so that's why you surround yourself with good people that understand you. But that's not going to be always possible. And so you either do two things. You either suck it up and get through it without asking anything unless it's something extremely medical, like your blood pressure is going off because you have autonomic dysreflexia. But the other option is you have to say to yourself, I'm going to just ask. And with the reality that you're going to create a distraction for a second, um, and you're going to have to get over the embarrassment of asking for something potentially personal, like your catheter or your plague bag, your urine. Um, there is a certain level of, I think, expectation and boundary you can't ask your friends to do yet. I think it's hard to say, hey, can you get me on a toilet because I'm out? That is, there's unless they really, really, really want to learn about your needs, so some things you have to really work around. So it is a loaded question, and my common theme is suck it up or ask what you need, but try to not get worn out by the embarrassment that's coming with that question, because like all of us, we're going to get embarrassed because of the nature of the question. I don't know if I answered your question, Linda, but
No, we're getting a good response about what you said because one guy wrote in with you, Dr. Chang. I don't know how a meeting can be boring, just saying. And I thought, yeah, because when you were saying that, I thought, yes, I have been in those meetings, and maybe the room is full, and if you get up from the center of the meeting or you have to walk around the table, everybody's going to see you leave the meeting and
yep.
know that you're you're just now. That's
Yeah,
awful.
you cannot hide. There is no way you're gonna hide from leaving a meeting and when half the group has to get out of their chair so you can get through, it's yeah, so next time I probably would have parked by the door. Yeah.
You
And
got that right.
you
I
know,
would know better next time, but that time if there's no getting out, there's just no getting out.
no
And
getting out.
that's
And I think to be a successful person with the limitation, physical limitation, the patient is a virtue for us. We have to be patient with everything. Um, uh, just the fact that caregivers come and get me up every morning. Some people come early, some people come late. And if I'm up, if I'm awake, that means I'm waiting. It's a matter of life for us then. It's you try to control that as best you can, but you're always waiting for somebody. That's probably my frustration because I like to be independent, but the fact that in order for me to be independent, I have to rely on people. And to rely on people, that means you gotta wait.
yes, that is so true. That is so true. Yeah, it's a real challenge um, to try to manipulate some of the situations that you can get in. The waiting, and also I've had a lot of people saying, I see something that's going on, and I can say, if it's like other people involved, and I can say, well, stop now or whatever, but I can't go over and, like break up a fight, or I can't, if I see a little kid that's like walking too close to the street, I can't run out and get that kid. And I can yell for somebody, but I can't go react in the way that I would like to. And that not being able to do the things that you want to just automatically do can be such a challenge. It's a part of life that has to be learned, and it's very frustrating. It's just
If you
extremely
want to
frustrating.
succeed and overcome your disability, that is one area you have to get better at. Always, you have to learn to be patient. You have to learn to problem solve, and you have to learn to communicate your needs and wants and expectations. I think those three things I just said are probably a key source of adjustment to your disability.
And I talk to a lot of people that are wanting to go out for the first time, and they're wanting to go out, teens that want to go out without their mom or dad. They want to go out with their friends. And mostly what they do, I hear now they do a lot of things. And some teens have wonderful friendship relationships, and they're just fabulous, and the kids kind of learn what they need to do. They'll learn how to transfer in and out of the car, and just wonderful. But mostly what I find is that the kids will just get in the car and then they just drive around, which is kind of like what all teenagers have done since I was a teen. But every once in a while, I'll have somebody like an adult, and I want to go out to the bar with my buddies, but I don't want my wife to have to come along. And, in case something happens, I want to be a grown-up man and go out with my friends. And so we've worked on different strategies for that. Do you have any strategies for people who are trying to go out for the first time? Not really, well, either alone, they're going to go out to the store by themselves, or, which is quite a harrowing situation the first time you go do that, or they just want to go out with their friends and hang out, but nobody knows really what they need. So we kind of talked about communicating needs, but do you have any strategies for that first time going out in the world, and you're worried about your bowels, you're worried about your bladder, you're worried about if you're going to choke, you're worried about, all these different things. Any suggestions for
First
getting
of
out?
all, yeah, I think it's awesome that the individual wants to go out and be free and be independent. That in itself, it's harder than to stay at home and hide. So, so I would support that. I would try to reinforce that wanting to be free as an individual with limitations. The only thing I could see, just have a emergency backup situation that you can call if there's especially if you're going out with a group that doesn't understand anything about you. So, um, so you need to have that backup process because if you don't, you're going to get stuck. And when you get stuck, sometimes it's good, okay, sometimes could be devastating, but most of the time it's just inconvenient. And you come home, you learn your lesson, and I think you and I talked about it. One point I mentioned uh, I was in a fraternity in college, and my fraternity brothers wanted to carry me up to the third floor to a party, and they put me on a couch. I enjoyed the party. My fraternity brothers enjoyed it way too much. They became too drunk. At the end of the night, they couldn't carry me back down because none of them were able to carry me. So I was stuck on that chair for many hours until one of them got sober enough to carry me back down. So I realized I don't belong on third floor parties. I hate to admit such stupidity, but I learned quickly at a young age of 19 that I have to figure these things out. So, but I'm glad I did it, because I want to be around people. So I would support that. I just as long as they have an emergency call to in case something significant that would cause life or death issue. If it caused inconvenience, I want to say don't worry about it. But if it's a life death issue, then definitely have that phone call available, and or pull one of the nicest friends you're gonna go out with, the one that you think is the most empathetic, because they want to know. They just don't know what to say. So if you look at the one that's most empathetic and you pull them aside and say, "Hey, here's just some things I wanted you to think about. If you can help me out, so these things happen." My
Well,
father, my father followed me everywhere for the first 3 weeks when I was driving my van, because if I had to go to rehab, he just wanted to make sure I could get there. So after a few months, I was driving to college on my own and having to go down the turnpike. You can't grab the little ticket, so you have to beep the horn and ask people to come out. And but that was in the old days. But now, so those are the learning lessons you learn as you want to be independent.
now let me ask you, John, was it your need to have your father follow you, or was it your father's need to follow you?
Oh, it's definitely my father's need. I
Yeah.
didn't want him anywhere near me, but he wanted to make sure I didn't break down and what to do, and but he had to feel comfortable that I was doing it right.
Well, yeah, and sometimes that inner circle, they become protective of you, which can
Absolutely.
have good, very good things, so he
Mhm.
didn't he didn't hang on. 3 weeks is not too long.
Nope. Nope.
For your dad, for a 19-year-old, that would probably be very painful for you, John. And I sympathize for your 3 weeks of being tail. But,
Kale.
sometimes people need to know. And, everybody, it's not an injury is just not you. It affects everybody, like you say, in that inner circle. And so
Yeah,
learning,
yeah, absolutely. So
yeah.
those 3 weeks, I made sure I went the speed limit. I did not rob any banks. I did everything under, what I was supposed to, and he felt very comfortable. And then after that, I started speeding and robbed some
Oh,
banks.
for sure. Yeah, yeah. Because you're 19, because you can.
In fact,
So you do those things. Well, for the gentleman that wanted to go out and didn't want his wife to come, they they settled the deal by because he was worried about going out and his wife was worried about him going out. So they settled the deal that she got a girlfriend and the three of them went to the bar where the guys were going to hang out and they sat in one part of the bar and the wife and the girlfriend had their own evening together, but she was there and it helped both of them. And so that was and it after one time they were like, okay, we've got this, but they just needed to cross that threshold of
yeah.
can I do this or can I
Can we
do
do
that?
it? The
And
anxiety. Yeah.
yeah, and it turned out to not be, they both had made it into such a harrowing thing. How is this going to work? And it is harrowing. I'm not putting it down. I'm not shaming them for that at all because that is just the way things are. But it turned out that it was okay and nothing like your experience, nothing bad happened. Now, it's good to know if something untoward happened, you've got that little bit of help, and so that's good.
Remember
Now,
what I said. about anxiety. The monster that we create is always bigger than what it is.
That is so
So,
true.
so you have to
That is,
sit down and say, look, is it really that bad? And usually it's not.
you know what, John? Those are words of wisdom that I am going to carry with me forever now because I let myself get all wrapped up with, oh no, this is going to happen. Oh no,
Yeah. And
I can,
most of the
I
time it
can,
doesn't ever happen that way, right? Just you get yourself all
no, it
worked up.
never does. And when I get up the next day, it's like it's a whole different day and everything has changed. And yeah, it was nothing. And I lost a whole night's sleep worrying about something. Okay, now we've got some questions that people had written in before. So, how do you deal with an ableist attitudes in the medical setting?
It's a hard one because either that person has a specific perspective in life that you're never going to change, or that person just lacked the education or information that allows them to change. So I'm going to go with the latter part because the first part you can't do a thing about. They're always going to have that attitude. But continue to be friendly and educate. When the opportunity comes to educate, but always be friendly first because that opens them up to want to engage in you. That is critical. So smile, eye, good eye contact, say thank you. And when they seem like they're in a position to talk, and you tell them what you need and what you don't need, and hopefully that is enough to influence a little bit.
Okay. Now here's one, and this is an urgent question because it's in all caps. So this is a very serious question. How to gain authority?
You mean so when you say how to gain authority, it means how to have more control of your life?
I would assume so. There's no detail, but it's in all caps. So it's a very serious question from this listener. How to gain authority?
I'm
We
trying not
kind of
to
hit a little bit on it.
Yeah, I'm trying not to interpret as I want more power, to more I want more control in my life. Um,
That's what I would guess.
yeah, because having more power doesn't give you a great life. It just means you're looking for something you don't have. Having more control of your life is different. And the critical part of that statement would be control what you can control. A lot of us spend time thinking about things we can't control. So yeah, we should think about those things, but it shouldn't impact our life. Like, for example, the beautiful weather today is 71, but tomorrow it's going to go back to 50 and it's going to be cold and it's going to be cold for another 10 days. And yeah, do I like it? No, but I have no control of it. But I could, try to do things that are warm and they so control what you can control. People you can't control. All you can do is ask. All you can do is communicate. So, yeah. So I would say hopefully that answers their question.
Well, and I don't know anything about this person's situation, but I thought your example of your dad following you in the car is a beautiful example of maybe you need to let the person who's you feel is being too authoritarianistic, maybe you need to let them have their way and then say, now today I'd like to do that on my own.
Mhm.
And, but let them have maybe they need that time, like your dad needed that time, which was his issue, not yours. And maybe they have an issue. So, slowly bringing them into that might be, I thought that example was just wonderful. Here's a person who writes in who says, I feel like a burden to my spouse. He did not sign up for this. So it's a woman who apparently her spouse must be her caregiver. And so now and she says he did not sign up for this. So she's feeling guilty.
I hope I'm not offending too many men, but women are so much better as a gender than men when it comes to disability. Um, it's hard. I would poo-poo it if I think that it's easy for men to all of a sudden have their wife in a world of disability and they have to learn to be a caregiver and learn how to communicate. Think of the words I'm saying. You want a male individual who knows how to talk and want to be a caregiver. Those are like opposite of what men are. We're not very good at communicating. We're not good at caregiving at that. Women are so much better at that. And so when you have a female who's disabled and a guy that has to change their life to it, yeah, it's hard because she's feeling like a burden. He doesn't know what to do at half the time. And I know I apologize, I'm generalizing here, but it's a lot of that is somewhat truthful. Um, and my suggestion for this individual, the female, is to find ways to be as independent as possible to lighten the burden. Like for I do all the billing, I do all the communicating with doctors. I take on a burden on part of the house as much as I can because it's just that's the nature of what I can control. Um, am I answering your question, Linda? I'm sort of going on tangents, but
Well,
you know,
we only have little snippets of the questions, so we don't really know the whole story. But she says she feels like a burden to her spouse.
Mhm.
And so I would wonder if he feels the same way. Maybe he doesn't mind. Maybe,
Maybe he doesn't, maybe, and even if he doesn't mind, it's going to be naturally for her to feel like a burden. All of us who are disabled, always at some point in our daily day or our day in our life, we feel like we're a burden to our family or friends because we are asking for something that is not what you grow up thinking you had to do. Okay. You grow up, you think you're going to get married, you're going to have children, you're going to get old. All these things you do it independently. All of a sudden now, none of that makes sense. And so we are going to feel like a burden in somebody's eyes sometime. And for me, it's almost every day I feel like a burden on people. So you would think I would get used to that, but I hate being a burden. That's probably one of my biggest pet peeves, um, being that always want to be independent. So you find ways to contribute to the relationship by being less of a burden. And hopefully that works its way out. The data says right now that, two out of every marriages go on and get divorced after um, if one of the partners become disabled. So it's higher than the average population of able-bodied people. Why? Because of these issues you just said. So,
and also we don't know, maybe he makes her feel like she is a burden.
hmm
So
hmm
maybe it's time it's time to have that frank discussion between each other, or to get a third party involved, like somebody like you who can kind of help wade through this. And that's okay to have a somebody to an an independent intermediary.
And it's so easy to blame the disability as the problem. It is so easy from both sides. It's like because it's the obvious. But I have to tell you, I see patients right now, and none of them are disabled. Well, let me take that back. I do have a client that's disabled, but most of them are able-bodied people. And the concept of one spouse feeling the other one's a burden comes up all the time. And so it is not, they may not use the word burden, but they do use the word I'm frustrated with them. I get impatient with them. And it's a common factor in life when you share two lives together. The problem with being in a wheelchair is that the disability becomes an easy target.
Yeah, it becomes the excuse rather than maybe the problem as well. Also, there's a listener who wrote in and says, as a man, I 100% agree, John. So there's one man who's on your side
All right, I didn't offend at least one person, so
with your man theory. Okay, one last question because we're really out of time, but there's one last question. I have a friend who asked me if it's okay to ask questions related to my disability, and they said, well, sure. But now she asked too many questions. I constantly feel like I have to explain myself. She thinks everything I do is amazing, and I want her to stop.
I I try to flip it on the opposite side and think of it as it's awesome that this person truly wants to know your perspective in life. I think over time they're going to learn enough that they don't need to ask the question. I rather favor on that side than to shut the person down to not ask questions anymore.
Okay.
Give it
Well,
time. Give
that's
it
a good
time.
point.
This
Yeah,
person
yeah.
truly wants to understand where you now, yeah, there are that inspirational, awesome people tend to look at you because you're disabled. Um, but man, I would rather see that positively than negatively. But give the person time, continue to explain your life, and over time, I think it will decrease because they already know enough. You know, in some ways, I think the person's asking is really trying to meet some other needs that she needs, her need for attachment, her needs for attention. I don't know, but we don't have a lot of information. But my initial reactions is be patient with the person that's really invested in your interest in your life. That might not be the right answer, but that's how I would go about it.
But it's a good answer. And with that, we have to close because our time is up. John, it is always wonderful. I just treasure every moment we spend together. I really mean that seriously. And I hope you'll come back again someday and we'll talk about
Absolutely.
more things because you always have such wisdom.
Thank you, Linda. It's great to be with you, and you always bring great questions, thought-provoking questions. I don't know if I know all the answers, but at least I can give my tidbits in life. And appreciate you inviting me again. And I will talk to you soon.
All right. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Bye bye.